the Jefferson Elementary School District Governing Board meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. Ms. Santa Cruz, will you do roll call, please?
Manufo Liaiga Anawai.
Here.
Aaron Rashba.
Here.
Shaquille Ali.
Here.
Anthony Sujisaka.
Here.
Andrea Jordan.
Here. And then we'll be moving to the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Valenti, would you lead us in the pledge?
Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we are going on to the approval of the agenda. We will be removing item 15 from closed session. Are there any other amendments that anyone would like to make? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the agenda.
I second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Moving on to communications, board member acknowledgements and commendations. I will start on my left.
None to report. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I would like to commend the superintendent, I believe a few of our principals and union representatives, teachers. Did you have any other admin besides yourself? Okay. Yeah, so they had their collaboration conference. Actually, you could probably explain it better. But any matter, I just like to commend our administrators and teachers for going off and working in a collaborative manner and going through their trainings and workshop seminars with other people in the state who are experts in making sure our district and our teachers work together collectively and not have a adversarial relationship. So kudos to all of you.
I just wanted to wish all students, families, teachers, and staff a good summer break. We always remind our students at home that learning does not stop over the summer, and really proud that we've got such great summer programs in the district for students to take advantage of. I also just wanted to note the libraries and such a great way to foster continued learning over the summer, and just to note that they are offering a $1,000 scholarship to students who do the reading challenge, just reading 20 minutes a day, and wanted to encourage all students and families to participate in that. Thank you.
I can ask a question about that. So how many people can get the scholarship and what do they have to do?
I believe it is just one winner, but I'm not certain of that. And what they have to do is read for 20 minutes a day for 30 days, and you can submit. You can enter as many times as you wish if you complete those 20 minutes multiple times on the honor system, of course.
Oh, I just want to say it's great to be here. I appreciate all of the hard work that's been done by our administrators and all of our teachers and students who continue to enjoy this break that we have during the summer. And I will be missing that visit to Big Lift. I'm disappointed to be missing that, but I do want to also echo that there are great programs going on. Visited with some of the Park and Rec staff last week who said, if you have your next school board meeting, we're still open. We would like to encourage Daly City youth to sign up for Park and Rec programs. They did mention that they have a low enrollment, so they were hoping that we would make sure to be a space for them to outreach to other families who can take advantage of their Parks and Rec program here in our city. I do want to also commend Bill Heath and his team, I want to thank them. Camp Unity, who has been in and out of our district, is back at Westlake Elementary, and also Mike Laurel and his team. They are serving 150 to 200 kids. I don't get to be there every day, but they would not be able to keep those doors open without all of the collaboration that is happening. And it's wonderful to see that a lot of our students are there. And I want to commend my colleague, Trustee Ali, because Yi was just something that we talked about, and we were referencing the My Mayor's Youth Employment Program in San Francisco, and now it's thriving here. We have 14 high schoolers that are part of the program at Westlake. So while not all of them signed up for Yi, they missed the deadline. We were able to fundraise and give them small stipends, but we do have 4 high schoolers who are of our district who are interning through the Yi program, and they are JUHSD students. So what I think is wonderful and I want to highlight is that Camp Unity is the only program like this in the state. Utah has one too, but we are the only Polynesian emphasis curriculum program. And I appreciate that Superintendent Tony Thurman will be visiting on the last week. And I think this is something that should be celebrated in our district, and would love colleagues to come out, because they've been very intentional about making sure that this stays in Daly City. And that is the hope. And so 25% of Camp Unity come from outside of our district. 75% are our district. And I bring up the 25% is because these students come from other school districts throughout San Mateo County, because there's no other program like that. So they also do Pacific literature. They read every day from a Pacific art author. So we're not challenging that, but it's amazing, because this is something that Trustee Jordan and I have talked about, how we can be very intentional in vetting our books, making that be a more seamless process from the state level, and how it can trickle down to us, and how we can get, not just talk about ethnic studies, but our ethnic culture in literature into our classrooms. So I love that we're able to do that at Camp Unity, and we've already had a few authors come through, and it's very difficult to get these books because they're only out of the University of Hawaii or in New Zealand. So these authors were intentional about making sure that kids and families that not just of Polynesian descent, but that wanted to learn more about Pacific history are able to get those books in their hands. And that is because of the collaboration that is happening here at our district. So I just want to commend the team. And I'm just very glad for the patience and grace that continues to be extended to me by our administrators and the colleagues.
I echo my fellow board trustee sentiments. I did want to touch on the Park and Rec program for Daly City. So in addition to obviously the call out, if you have any children between the ages of, I believe it's 6 and 12, if they're sitting at home and you want them in activities, please definitely sign them up. For children that are, I believe, old enough or in high school right now, I believe that they have a volunteer program. So, something to keep in mind. And then there's also availability for the high school students to also get paid as staff at Park and Rec as well. So if we have any families out there where they're, their teenagers are sitting on the couch and playing video games, and you're like, hey, let's get you out here. Money is an incentive to get the kids to get out of the house as well. So just something I wanted to point out for the public that's viewing in today. And with that, we'll move on to superintendent comments.
Yes, thank you. So I have a few things to talk about. So brace yourself. So we have the budget agreement. So the governor and the legislature reached an agreement. And so we're just awaiting trailer bills. And there's no major changes to education. There's just a few things here and there. So we'll be sharing that in August with the updates, but there's nothing changing our projections with the budget. You all received an email today for a public records request regarding our ethnic studies program. So we'll be looking to see how long it will take us to gather that information and responding to them. So we'll respond on your behalf to let you know. We, as Ms. Leaiga Anawai mentioned, that we have our summer programs, and I visited the summer programs this week, and we have over 600 students attending our summer programs. So we have the Big Lift at 2 sites. We have Power Scholars, which is for the older students, and then we have the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula, as well as extended school year. And so we have about 100, 150 at each of those sites. And that's about 12% of our student population attending our summer programs. So the students are really engaged, lots of STEM activities, and a lot of different ways to help them support their literacy and math skills. So it's not more of the same, it's a different approach, which is really nice to see. That's what we need for our students to help them achieve and be prepared for the fall so that they don't have that summer learning loss. As Trustee Ali mentioned as well, we did attend, I and Mr. Valenti, as well as 2 principals and 6 of our AFT colleagues attended the California Labor Management Institute. Mr. Hagan is in the audience as well. He was there with us, and it was really productive. We walked away with kind of a tentative plan, but we realized we were missing a partner. We're missing our CSEA partners. And so we developed a plan, but we want to work with them to include so that we have a very inclusive partnership, and we're creating a team that is going to work together to help with communication and also remove barriers with, especially with our chronic absenteeism. That's kind of a focus of ours as a group. And so that was really productive. The last thing I want to mention is our construction projects that have started, thanks to Mr. Heath in the audience as well, and Mr. Lauro. We have the resurfacing of the playgrounds and the quads at Daniel Webster, Thomas Edison, and Fernando. You might see that big pile of dirt out there in Fernando's field, which is they're stockpiling dirt so that they can level the field for the track. And then 2 of our schools are having roof repairs at Ben Franklin and MP Brown. We're also upgrading our phone system to the voice over IP, so going from copper to fiber. And then we're also upgrading our wireless access points. And all of these projects are working, going smoothly. And these are all, of course, been previously approved by you at a previous meeting. So that's kind of what's been happening around the district. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to be moving on to the consent agenda. The administration recommends approval of the start items on the rest of the agenda. Are there any items that fellow trustees would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing as there's not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 We will be moving on to resolution number 230628 to excuse Manufo Leaiga Anawai from the regular board meeting on June 14th of 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's a first and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Ms. Leaiga Anawai,
Aye.
Mr. Rashba, Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Mr. Sujisaka,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye. That was unanimous. Moving to item 6D, CSBA Annual Education Conference. Board members will confirm attendance for the CSBA Annual Education Conference held in San Francisco from November 30th through December 2nd to receive ongoing professional development.
So we brought this back so that Ms. Leaiga Anawai can let us know. And then also if Mr. Rashba, if you have your dates yet, I know you said you might need more time. So if you would like to, and then also to confirm that the 3 of you are planning to go to the pre-conference as well. So we have those. But Ms. Leaiga Anawai, were you wanting to attend the conference in December? November, December in San Francisco.
I will not be attending this year. Thank you.
Okay. And then we will, Mr. Rashba, if you would just confirm with me, and then we can publicly say it at a later date, but we'll get the 3 of you registered this summer so we can get the early bird special. Thank you.
So it says in action, and I was just going to say that because I don't remember in the past if we had to have an action on this. We've just had a discussion. So
That's a great question. I think I put action because you're confirming with me, but since we said action, maybe we can say a motion to approve the attendees with Mr. Rashba determining later.
I have a question about that. Did we already vote on how many people we were going to send? Did we at least
I
set
think
the
that would
number
be
at the last
this.
meeting? Okay.
I think the last meeting we just discussed, but yes.
Okay. So then the motion would be to approve 3 of us or 4 of us?
Why don't we say up to 4?
Yes. So I will entertain a motion to confirm attendance for up to 4 board members for the CSBA annual conference held in San Francisco from November 30th through December 2nd of 2023. If there's no other comments, I'll take a motion. Perfect.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. We're going to be moving on to item 7G.
So President Jordan, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make a ask for this item to the superintendent. If we had any schools or groups that we could submit to participate. I don't know if we do. That's why I
We
just wanted.
already did.
Okay, I missed that. Thank you.
The
That's
TRP
awesome.
dance program has
Okay.
been submitted, so we will find
Amazing.
out in July.
Thank
Great
you.
minds think alike. That was a request at the last meeting, so thank you for bringing that up. Moving on to item 7G, mediated agreement. The administration recommends approval of year 1 of 3 of a mediated agreement in the amount of $88,385,000 for SY 2023-24. The agreement is to be funded through the special education budget. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing as there's not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. Moving on to item 7J, adoption of the LCAP for the 2023-24 year. The administration recommends the governing board approve the local control accountability plan for the 2023-24 school year. Are there any questions?
If there's no questions, I'll move that we approve the LCAP for the 2023 to 2024 school year.
Second.
First and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was
Can I
unanimous.
just also say a local control accountability plan, right?
Yes, local control accountability plan,
Yeah.
LCAP.
Because we're using the acronyms, but the public might not know what we're saying.
Correct. And I do believe that I said LCAP first and then I spelled it out. Apologies. I can say it first and yes, go from there. Moving on to item 7K, the presentation on the California School Dashboard Local Indicators for the 2022-23 school year. This is an information item.
Yes, so Pam Scott is our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, and she is not available tonight, but she did create a video to share with you about the dashboard. And so if you have questions, I can hopefully answer them. But here is the video that she created for us.
This is Pam Scott, and I'm presenting virtually tonight on the topic of the California School Dashboard. The California School Dashboard is an online tool that shows how districts and schools are performing on the state and local indicators included in the California's School Accountability System. The dashboard provides information that schools can use to improve policies, practices, and procedures. The dashboard was created to give parents and the public a better idea of what is happening in both our schools and districts, and to identify districts and schools that need extra help. The dashboard is a component of the local control funding formula law passed in 2013 that significantly changed how California provides funding to public schools and holds local educational agencies accountable for student performance. The local control funding formula law required that the State Board of Education adopt a new accountability tool that reflects performance in different priority areas identified in the law. The dashboard reports performance of the state and local indicators that the State Board of Education included in this new accountability tool. The state indicators are based on data that is collected consistently across the state from each district through the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, also known as CAPDAS, and other testing vendors. The state indicators are academic indicator, reported separately for English language arts and math assessments, English learner progress, chronic absenteeism, graduation rate, and suspension rate. State data is not available for some priority areas identified in the local control funding formula statute. For these priority areas, the State Board of Education approved the local indicators, which are based on information that a district collects locally. The local indicators are basic conditions of learning, priority 1, implementation of state academic standards, priority 2, parent and family engagement, priority 3, school climate as measured by a local climate survey, priority 6, access to a broad course of study, priority 7. The standards approved by the State Board of Education require a local agency to 1, annually measure its progress on the local performance indicator based on locally available data. 2, report the results at a regularly scheduled public meeting of the local governing board. And 3, report the results to the public through the dashboard. The State Board of Education approved self-reflection tools for each local indicator in the dashboard. We have used these self-reflection tools and are reporting our results to you this evening. Priority 1, teachers, materials, and facilities for the 2022-2023 school year. This measure addresses the percentage of appropriately assigned teachers, students' access to curriculum-aligned instructional materials, and safe, clean, and functional school facilities. Using the self-assessment online tool, we have determined we've met the standard. Priority 2, academic standards for the 2022-2023 school year. This measure covers the implementation of state academic standards. Using the self-assessment online tool, we have determined we met the standard. Priority 3, parent engagement for the 2022-2023 school year. The local educational agency, LEA, annually measures its progress in seeking input from parents in decision-making, promoting parental participation in programs, and reports the results to its local governing board at a regularly scheduled meeting and to stakeholders and the public. Using the self-assessment online tool, we have determined we met the standard. Priority 6, local climate for the 2022-2023 school year. This measure addresses information regarding school environment based on a local climate survey administered yearly on the topics of school safety and connectedness. Using the self-assessment online tool, we have determined we met the standard. Priority 7, access to a broad course of study for the 2022-2023 school year. This measure explores whether students have access to and are enrolled in a broad course of study, including the programs and services developed and provided to unduplicated students and individuals with exceptional needs. Using the self-assessment online tool, we have determined we met the standard. In conclusion, JESD has met standard for all of the local indicators for 2022-2023. Thank you.
Are there any questions from fellow trustees?
Yeah, I have a question. So I noticed on there it said that there was no teacher vacancies. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I believe it was that there were no teachers teaching out of their certificated areas, not that there's no teacher vacancies. We can roll that back, but that's, I believe, the what it said.
All right, thanks for that
Yeah,
clarification.
no, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I guess I'll ask a quick question. When is this going to be updated on the website for the public to see?
It goes onto the dashboard, and I believe that is public in December. But there might be an earlier one. I have to follow up with Miss Scott on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Any
It's
other,
usually released in December, though.
any other questions? Seeing as there's not, again, that was an information item. So we will move to item 8C. The administration recommends that the board adopts resolution number 230628, authorizing signatories for the Jefferson Elementary School District. Are there any comments or questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a first and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Ms. Liiga Anuai,
Aye.
Mr. Rashba,
Aye.
Mr. Sujisaka,
Aye.
Mr. Ali,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan.
Aye. That was unanimous. We'll be moving to item 8. Oh, sorry.
8H. 8H. It is 8H.
Yes, 8H. The administration recommends approval of a contract with Frank and Grossman Landscape Contractors Incorporated for a one-time hillside clearing for the geotechnical monitoring project at Marjorie H. Tobias Elementary School for an amount not to exceed $60,000. This work will be funded by the General Maintenance Fund. Are there any comments or questions from fellow trustees? Seeing as there's not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
So first and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. The next item is item 8I. The administration recommends ratification of the approval for issuance of a check paid to PG&E for installation of electric services to the JESD faculty and staff housing project in the total amount of $55,264.23. This will be funded by Measure U. Are there any comments or questions? If there's not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. Moving to item 8J, adoption of the fiscal year 2023-24 proposed budget. The administration recommends that the board trustees adopt the fiscal year 2023-24 proposed budget for all active district funds. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing as there's not, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the budget for 2023 to 24 school year.
Second.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. Moving on to item 9A. The administration recommends approval of the following administrative appointments. Brian M. Bethel, Vice Principal Fernando Rivera, effective July 25th, 2023. 1 MWMA Step 3 plus 1100 for MA degree. And Lauren Buckley, Principal of George Washington, effective July 20th, 2023. 1 MWMA Step 2 plus 1100 for MA degree. Are there any comments or questions from fellow trustees?
I just want to say congratulations to our new Jefferson Elementary administrators. Congratulations.
Are there any other comments?
I echo the sentiments
I
of my
echo those
colleague and-
sentiments as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I echo the sentiments of congratulatory remarks to these two administrators and their appointments, and I second the motion.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. Congratulations to Mr. Bethel and Ms. Buckley. We'll be moving on to item 11A, the consent agenda considerations. This will be a discussion. The governing board will consider qualifying criteria for items placed on the consent agenda.
If it helps, I did make a copy of the page that I shared with you from the Brown Act handbook. So if you want to take one and pass it down.
And then for Trustee Liaiga Anawai, I just wanted to give you kind of a heads up on why this is on the agenda, and also obviously for our fellow trustees as well. So it came up at the last meeting as to why we had certain things on the consent agenda, and we had pulled some things off. Originally, the conversation was around certain things were routine or not routine. I think Trustee Ali had mentioned that at CSBA, that annual was not considered routine. However, in the Brown Act and in what was sent by Acting Superintendent McCulick, actually it does consider annual items as routine. And then I think the other conversation we had was then we'll do it based on costs. So anything, above or below a certain amount, maybe those would not be on consent, and those would be on the regular agenda. Noting that anything over 50,000, or so anything 50,000 and over have to come to the board anyway. And so if the notion is, well, anything 50,000 and over has to be on the agenda, that means that all of the items from a financial standpoint would be required to be on regular business. And so we want to have a discussion around, well, what does that look like? Do we want to change? Do we want to have a threshold? Are we okay with what the Brown Act has indicated? Do we want to add something in our own protocols or policies or bylaws to ensure that we are adhering to not only giving the public information, but again, we are comfortable with approving things as one versus pulling them out and having a true discussion on it. So that's kind of the gist as to why we're having the consent agenda discussion.
I wanted to make a comment. I think from my experience on the board, I agree with what is written, but I know that there are certain occasions, and I know this is something I've experienced with Trustee Ali. There are times that we, outside of these reasons, we have to pull it out to be, one, accountable and transparent, because while it's on the consent agenda, I envision we will be given some of these items from time to time and on occasion where we want to pull them off so that we can have an open discussion, so that the public can better understand. So I know that doesn't fall under this. I'm wondering if we should revisit some wording. I don't know if that is needed, or we would just do it as we have done in the past, as case by case, because it's not frequent. But I do know that those occasions will arise just depending on the season or whatever it is we might be in at that time. And so just to say that I know that occasion happens, but that I do agree with what is written here as far as what looks to be routine and what we've continued to practice over time.
So I think the question is, do we keep with the practice we've been doing where we put consent, where we follow the Brown Act? We have to follow the Brown Act. Or is there other qualifying criteria that we want to establish, or that the board wants to establish to give direction to me and to the president, that we make sure that items that are, say, over 1 million are never put on consent, that we always have to talk? Or that's an example. Or certain items that we see routinely that we say we definitely don't want those on the consent agenda, because you always have the privilege to say this is on consent and I think we should pull it. So do you want to have a criteria that you give us now that we know that we never put it on consent, certain items, certain types of items? Or do you want us to keep the practice that we're doing, and that you know that you have that right to pull an agenda item when you see, because sometimes it is case by case or topic specific. So we just want a little more direction as to what you as a board would agree upon, so that when we set the agenda, we can have it prepared and ready for you.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time arguing about this, but I still feel like we're dealing with some semantics with this, and I don't agree that something that happens yearly is routine. That was my main point. And if you look at this Brown Act, first of all, the Brown Act is about being transparent. It's about sun shining and the public having a chance to know what we're going to talk about and that we're not doing things in private that should be done in public. So the spirit of the Brown Act is not for us to rush things and do things, to rush things. I don't think that's the spirit of the Brown Act. And we're not violating any laws if we put something on the public agenda. We're not breaking any laws. So to me, I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to argue about it, but to me, annual is not routine. But at the workshops that I went to at CSBA, they encouraged us to not accept annual as being routine. Routine would be something that's monthly, right? So, and a good point to illustrate that is if we have agencies that are providing after school services, and I don't know how long the contracts are for. Sometimes it could be for a year, or it could be for 2 years, 3 years, I don't know. But I don't think that would be something that's routine. There are outside contractors that are providing services, and we're not even hearing anything from them about the challenges that have happened during the pandemic, with staffing those programs. And, I know the last time I heard about it from the administration, we had students who were on waiting lists. So I don't know how that could be considered routine. So that's just my issue on that. As far as the thresholds and the money, anything that's over 50,000 has to be brought to us for approval anyway. So that's what my thoughts are as far as the money amounts. But I'm not in favor of saying we never put something on the consent agenda or anything like that. That wasn't my intent.
I want to actually dig a little deeper in what you just shared, because I mean, this round of contracts that just got approved were a lot of after school programs, and a lot of them are newer to our district. I mean, or at least maybe have come back. For example, like La Garza. I remember I would send my daughter to La Garza at Serramonte Del Rey, and I don't recall La Garza being part of our district. And I think that's a good example of, if La Garza does well, will we continue to just say it's on the consent agenda? So I do agree with you that maybe we need to revisit the language of what we consider routine, and maybe remove annual renewal. I would see, looking at the language that is provided here, that maybe routine wouldn't be annual renewal, and removing that and rewording that. That's a recommendation, because I do agree with you that the services that we do provide maybe is not something we want to just rubber stamp and say, let's just push through on the consent agenda. Maybe we do need to have those evaluations. And I know that we do get them, but I'm recalling, I don't know if we've ever had deep dives into all of the programs that we provide, annually. And I think that is our due diligence.
Can I respond? Yeah, I do remember there was a time where we had almost the same conversation, and that was the result that there was a meeting, maybe a couple meetings that were scheduled, where the agencies were given a chance to come and just talk to us about what they have been doing. It wasn't for us to scrutinize them or whatever the case may be. We just want to hear what's going on. And we talked about that at the last meeting. All of us, I think, were in agreement that it's a good thing to hear from those programs, was, what's going on. But I also agree with you that was my point. I understand the Brown Act, and but I also, when I read this, I still saw that comma. So for me, you have to explain to me, if you're going to call something an annual renewal of a program, that needs more explanation. Like, what programs are we talking about? And annual and routine are not the same thing. So I would be in favor of also maybe not using that language in our policy that, we're going to approve something annually, or we're just going to put it on the consent agenda. Now, there are some things maybe Mr. Valenti could explain to us, certain annual programs that do not depend on an outside agency that we would, approve. Or I know there's sometimes things like, if we don't have enough teachers that have their full credential, or, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, most of, like when we have folks that are working on ed code, that we have to have an annual approval by the board being brought to them But there's also folks that the number of possible needs, the need for folks in the future working on emergency credentials, we need to make some sort of a prediction. But those are less service oriented than just practical in order to do the hiring, I would say. When we do after school programs that were like ACEs and other kind of district based, I don't recall that there was necessarily an annual renewal, but again, I want to stay in my lane as well.
No, thank you. That was my point, because I brought this up in the context of our after school programs. All of them were just on the consent agenda. And it was my mishap to not ask the question before the meeting, but it was still my responsibility to ask the question, because I wanted to know if any board member had any question at all about any of the programs specifically, or just in general about after school programs. And so I'm glad that at least we have a chance to talk about it. And I appreciate President Jordan's suggestion that we add something to our policies about this so that we don't have to go through this again.
Are there any other comments?
Yes. I would like to say that, I am moved by what was stated in the memo you provided, Superintendent McCulloch, of the purpose of the consent agenda, and that is to focus our discussion on certain items. And so I think that there is value in having, things that are routine be able to be approved at once. We all are reviewing them in advance, and reading through. So I think that is a valuable exercise. I think that there are certain items that need to be approved on an annual basis that are routine. I was looking at the last meeting, and there was a few items about loan transfers, needing to transfer one from one fund to another on an annual basis. To me, that is routine. It happens generally, the same way every year, and I am comfortable personally with those things being on the consent agenda. I do agree with you, Trustee Ali, that some of these bigger programs, it's worth bringing up and asking questions about, especially the larger dollar items, because I think from a fiscal oversight perspective, it's good to review these things. And sometimes it is difficult, to know what's routine and what's not when you're a new board member. So I think that there is, a value to taking some of them off. I was going to raise, in my mind, a threshold might be $250,000. That's a large expense, and removing any programs or expenses above that amount, to me, would rise to the level of putting it on the non-consent agenda. So there's an opportunity to discuss it, even if quick.
And then, can I speak? Yeah. So I think I remember hearing I think it was in our last discussion where we were talking about how we wanted, I think one of the biggest reasons we pulled it was we wanted to hear from them. But I think I forget who said it, someone said something about it as in we, having them presenting at when we are going to approve their contract for the next year seems a little weird. But then, with all the meetings that we have throughout the year, like maybe remembering which meeting it's going to be hard for us, if we want to hear from them, since last meeting was June 14th, in May, I don't think I'm ever going to remember, let's call La Garza in. Let's call these other programs in. I'm wondering how would we remember to call these programs in to hear from them before, but I don't think we should maybe have them at their contract approval. I forget who said that, but I thought that was a good point.
It was me. And before we have someone answer that question, I also wanted to, so I attended the final Masters in Governance training today, and a couple of things were brought up that I wanted to share. So one of them was the board calendar. So I think that, I know Ms. McCulloch, we talked about this. I have access to that, but I think it'd be a great idea to share that board, that calendar with the rest of the board well in advance, so that way we would know when things should be coming on the agenda. However, outside of that, I also agree. So I think there's a different discussion here. There's a discussion of the consent agenda and there's a discussion of wanting people to come and present to us. So I don't think that they go hand in hand per se. Maybe they do a little bit. And I say that to say, based on what you said, it's like, okay, well, if they're on the agenda to get approved and we're having them meet, we have that with some things like the budget, like a couple things that are on the agenda tonight, right? However, if we have it in our planning agenda to have them present beforehand, find out if the program is going well, find out what the issues are, I think that should happen preferably beforehand, so that way we can fix anything or decide at that point, do we even want to move forward with another contract or another yearly or annual contract with them or not. So that's one part of it. I think the second part of it is from a consent agenda standpoint, you can pull items from the agenda. And the point is that we obviously are the goal is so that we are transparent with the public. The public has access to a lot of this stuff in advance. However, if we feel like we want to have discussion on it, ask additional questions, by all means, we can pull that. And so I don't want it to seem as though we're saying put everything on the consent agenda because we're trying to move past things. Noting that if at any meeting, and there are certain meetings or certain months throughout the year, I don't know if and newer trustees maybe not, but for someone that's been on the board, there are certain meetings that last, and like our regular meeting lasts until like 10:30. We already have it in our bylaws. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, where it says that if a regular meeting goes past 10:30, we actually have to stop the meeting and table all that discussion for a next meeting. So something also to keep in mind if we're saying, hey, we want everything on the agenda. So I just do want to point a couple of those things out as well.
So what I'm hearing is we want to have the after-school programs and programs like that not on consent, because that's an interest of the board and something that we want to make sure that there is a discussion. So I'm hearing that. I'm also hearing about presentations, which Ms. Jordan has mentioned, that we kind of have a draft of the meetings for next year, tentative meetings for 2024, but we have tentatively planned for April and May to have them come, the after-school programs come and present. We have to coordinate. So that's already on the radar to have that happen. So I think that addresses that concern, but that we also make sure that anything that is related to after-school programs or contracted services related to that, we would not have on consent agenda. That's what I'm hearing. I also heard a dollar amount. We do have some large projects that are really high that some are routine, some are not. So do we want to have that 250,000 threshold, or do we want to just stick with after school programs as an interest of the board and we want to make sure that those are not consent?
Before we answer that question, I kind of also wanted to point out, right? So we just said the 250,000, and then we also just said, oh, well, we want to make sure that we're transparent with the public. But I do want to note at this meeting that items that were not on the consent agenda, we didn't even discuss. So I do want to just I want you guys to think through, like, okay, we're saying this, but are we acting upon what we are saying? If something is not on the consent agenda and we're putting it on there for transparency, but we're just reading it and then approving it, should it, again, some certain things have to be on the regular agenda, but I just want to think through that as well, as we're saying things, but the actions are not in conjunction with our words, 100% at least at this time. And then we can answer do we want the 250,000?
I had just one suggestion about agencies coming to present. It doesn't have to be all at one meeting. Like, even if we schedule it, okay, you already get it. Thank you.
And then, yeah, I think I echo what you say, President Jordan. At the last meeting when we pulled a bunch of them, I remember we just approved, kind of went straight through and approved them. I don't know if there was any discussion about, besides the first one that we did discuss.
Can I respond? Well, the discussion was in general about after-school programs, and I think everyone has something to say about it. Even tonight, Trustee Liana Anoa'i. And honestly, like I said, that was the spirit of why I asked those to be pulled off. I don't really care about the number, what I cared about was we needed to talk about after school programs, and that was it. And that's still my. I'll just make a motion. Can we make motions on this tonight? My motion is that we do not include the after school programs or outside agencies that are contracting with us on the consent agenda.
Seeing that this is not an item for action, can we do that?
What you're doing is providing me direction so that when I draft the agenda, I have it ready. And so then when I meet with President Jordan, she also knows the direction as well. So I don't think we need to make a motion. You're just providing me direction because I draft the agenda and then share it with President Jordan. So just to be clear, I'm hearing that it's the after school programs are not consent. Dollar amount is not in play at this point. Is that correct?
Unless Trustee Rashba wants to talk about the number amounts again.
I am not wed to I think the number is what level we use is up for discussion. But I do believe that there's a certain limit that we should have items taken off the consent agenda just to make sure that they are discussed for the purpose of being open and being completely fiscally responsible with the public. In my mind, that level is still $250,000.
Can I ask?
I agree, actually.
Okay. Can I actually ask Mr. Laura, what do you think do you think there's a number, or how do you feel what do you think should be, I don't know, what's your recommendation?
So we're a CUPCA district. I don't know what that acronym means off the top of my head, but it's a uniform in California. It's a uniform public contract scaffolding or infrastructure that we have, to where when we're doing construction projects, anything that's over $200,000, we have to get formal bids for. Anything that's under $200,000, we don't need to get formal bids for, as in put out specs. We get multiple bids and we open them at a specific time. And because of that, I think anywhere from $200,000 to $250,000 is applicable. When it comes to various construction projects, if we weren't a CUPCA district, anything that would be over, I believe is like $5,000, would need any type of facilities or construction work. We would need to do formal bidding. So, in my experience as a CUPCA district, I think anywhere from $200,000 to $250,000 is an applicable amount. Sometimes we have, like Trustee Rashba had mentioned, usually at year end, we always pass resolutions to temporarily transfer money across different funds, because we cannot end the fiscal year at June 30th with a negative cash balance. And sometimes those are $1 million, sometimes they're $5 million, right? Those would be considered routine because we move the money right back starting July 1st. But, I think in terms of transparency, I've thought about it as well and talked about it with a few of our other administrators. But it would be wise to get the, after school providers to come in. I know that we've been doing a lot of great work with the ELOP funding that we've gotten. And this year we have 4 different contractors that we're rotating across all schools in the district. So I think, sometime in October or November, after we get past the craziness of school starting, it would be wise for us to, and a good way for them to come in and highlight the work that we're doing in our after school programs.
I have a follow-up question. So the only question that I would have, because Trustee Rashba said for discussion, and I'm going to go back to what I said before. If we put it on the regular agenda just to say what we're approving, that is not a discussion. And so I do want to be clear, like if you're pulling it off or you're saying routinely for the agenda, anything over $250,000 has to be on the regular business, just for us to say it is not a discussion, and I don't agree that that makes sense. But I'm open to whatever the rest of the board states.
No, I actually agree with that. I just want to say, because it doesn't make sense for us to remove it unless we're actually going to spend time, elaborating. So again, having an open dialogue to be transparent with the public. I totally agree with you.
And then I guess, oh, sorry, last question. Sorry. I'm trying here, you guys. I guess the other question is, because I know it's semantics about like all of these conversations. However, is there a place to write this? Because I think for me, I want to, I do not want to have this conversation when we have new board members come on board. I would rather, and we can have the conversation, right? But to be able to provide some information on this is the governance, and from our specific district, this is what the Brown Act says. In conjunction with everything together, this is how we move forward. And if at that time we decide to make any changes, then yes. But I feel like we've spent a lot of, basically 2 meetings having a conversation about what the rules and the policies are, where it's said, what it's said, why it's said, what someone feels. And I think having it in writing, for me, at least as a data person, allows less back and forth. And it's just, that's what it says. You don't agree with it from because we can't change the Brown Act. But if we don't agree as a board with our policies, then I think we can change it. But having it in writing prevents the confusion about what is allowable or not.
So I'm sure we can find a board bylaw that we could add, rewrite, add in what we're looking for. If we get specific, it locks us into it, though. So I want to be careful about putting it into writing, because it will lock us into that, and then we'd have to then change the bylaw in order to change it for the future. So my recommendation is to start with us having this practice, and just follow that. When I set the agenda, I just don't have any after school programs on consent at this point. I think that I also recommend that we kind of keep the practice of putting consent, board members knowing that they can remove an item if they want to discuss it. Otherwise, if we remove most of them, then we're having to read them all, like you said, and then it's just a routine approval, so that we leave it to the agency of the board members to say, I have something I want to say, I think we should discuss it, so I'm going to remove it from consent, except for the after school programs. That one I know not to put on consent anymore. Is that the consensus of the group? Do you want me to restate that?
No, that's definitely where my intent was, and I forgot what.
That's okay. Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, we're going to continue with consent as I have been practicing, except if there's an after-school program, I will not put it on consent. And you may pull anything else.
Okay, now I remember what I was going to say. So part of my intent at the last meeting was not necessarily to say we have to discuss everything or anything like that. What my intent was that if we see something, to try to at least pull it off and ask a question, right? So I think that's where I somewhat actually agree with Trustee Rashba now about the dollar amounts, but I think now I would just encourage, if you see a high amount on there, just ask to pull it off.
Yes, I am comfortable with that. I'm in agreement that it would be good practice to have in writing, what's policy around the consent agenda, and that after-school programs, should come off. And it's more incumbent upon us for those high dollar or very important items that we are watching those and pull them off the consent agenda.
So to clarify, do you want us to look at board bylaws to add language about consent agenda or not?
Well, I was going to ask, is that something that we could do at the yearly board, not retreat,
The governance workshop?
governance study
in.
session? That would be a good time. We could. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And this should be a part of a study session. Sorry, I'm going to ask another question here. So I know we're talking about programs, right? And I think we identified the after school program. However, are there other programs that are annual, that are not routine based on what we've all discussed today? And we don't have to come to this to the decision today, but I would say that if there are other programs outside of the after school program, I know that, like for example, Fit Kids was only at one school or two schools, and then we ended up getting more, right? So technically that's going to become an annual routine thing, right? It's not after school, but it is a program that is an outside agency. And so I do think that maybe we look into our programs and figure out, like, are there specific programs that are outside of the after school program that we should also be not in, and I would say the same thing, have them come and present. And for us, I think it's really about understanding, so that way when we're in the public and when people are coming to us and saying, hey, I don't understand this, we have the information to provide back. And I think a lot of times we get these items on the agenda, we get the information beforehand, we read it, we ask questions, but the reality is that our community members don't see that. I mean, they do have access to it. I think the reality is that they're probably waiting or hopefully expecting us to do all our due diligence and provide them back information. So while I agree with everything that we've said for after school programs, feeling like we may have to talk about other programs too, but I don't want to extend that today. Go ahead.
And then I was actually just going to say, maybe we could even have like programs earn a kind of certain type of tenure, like after a certain number of years with us. I don't know if that's something we want to open it up to, but that's something like, it sounds like the programs that we're really concerned about mostly are the ones that are first year, like you mentioned Fit Kids. Like this is our first year with it. It's like we want to hear how these programs are doing. But now if a program's been with us for 20 years and they've been doing a great job, we still want to hear from them, but maybe not. I don't know. That's something we could definitely discuss in the future, but nothing now. I'm just bringing that up to because I know Ms. Valenti does that on a yearly basis with teachers. So.
And I know some people might be getting fatigued by this, but I just wanted to say one more thing about the Brown Act, because we're discussing this as if we have to do what we're doing. We don't have to put those things on the consent agenda. And that's the way we're presenting this in our talk right now to the public. And we're saying the law and that. So we need to be careful, right? It's a choice. And it's a choice between whoever's making the agenda. I've been in those meetings, right? So we have to be careful how we're wording this. The Brown Act is about sunshine. It's not about let's put stuff on, so that we can move fast through the agenda.
Yes, it's guidance. We may put it on the consent agenda. Absolutely. So, and I think a lot of the programs that you're talking about, it's a judgment call at the time of developing the agenda. And so just knowing that if there's something on there that the president and I miss and we put it on consent and you feel strongly that it should not be on consent, you can pull it off during the meeting. So I think we have a good understanding, and after school programs will be removed. I'll mention in the governance study session when we prepare with that in January, usually, I'll look into having that consent agenda item by law language for us. But I think we have a solid.
Perfect. Are there any other comments or questions on this? If not, I'll move to item 12, persons wishing to address the board on unagendized or closed session items. This portion of the agenda is available for individuals to comment on or address the board on any issue that is under the board's jurisdiction and is not on the agenda or an item addressed in closed session. The maximum amount of time allowed for any speaker is usually 2 minutes. Are there any public comments at this time? Seeing as there's not, public comment is now closed. Moving on to item 13, governance team member comments, reports, and board meeting reflection. I'll start on my right.
I just want to wish everyone a great rest of the summer. I hope you get to get some sunshine outside of Daly City. Yeah, this bipolar weather can get you down. But just grateful for the conversation this evening. I appreciate us taking deep dives in things that I know when I was here in the past, we didn't always get to touch like this. So I know that it can be time consuming, but I'm very grateful that we're able to continue to have these conversations so that we can do business better and do business better in public. So grateful for today.
Thank you. I echo Trustee Leoninga Anawai's comments, and that was a helpful discussion on the consent agenda, just to be more aware of our board practices. And I think that it was a focused meeting. I agree with Trustee Ali that the purpose is not to rush, but it is good when we are efficient and keep our focus on the business of the students and our district. Thank you, and a good summer to everyone.
Yes, and I will say that we did a good job of listening actively and communicating openly and respectfully. This was one of the best discussions that I've been in a long time, and I appreciate us going through this. And I just want to say it again: I've been in board meetings where we were here till midnight and after midnight. So this 10:30 thing, I think we need to talk about it. You know, we need to be efficient, but what's more important than efficiency is effectiveness. And what we were doing tonight is talking about effectiveness. And if we're being effective, if the after school programs are effective, so if that takes until 10:30, so be it. We're probably going to be out of here in a few minutes, right, tonight. So there's always that balance. And I really appreciate working with all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, you always start on the opposite side of the room when I have something to say first, but it's okay. Every single time, it's always the opposite. Anyway, thank you all for the discussion tonight. I learned a lot. One of my favorite things about being on this board is learning how, school governance works, learning how public government works, learning all this stuff. And I'm learning a lot from all of you. So I really appreciate all your input. Have a great summer, and I will definitely keep an eye out for 10:31 from now on.
That's a question about that. So I don't remember that, but I think we might have put it in, and it wasn't because of me. It wasn't because of you. So just saying that, does the policy say that we need to vote to extend the meeting, or it just says we must leave at 10:30?
I can pull up that and put it in an information bulletin for you.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember it exactly, but it was done actually before, because I remember at Mr. Vidala's graduation party. I was going to mess that up. A trustee from a while ago said that they put it on, and I actually went and looked at it. So it was something that was done prior to my tenure on the board, maybe prior to your tenure on the board, and maybe we just never looked at it.
Yeah, I know that there was an issue with at City Hall. We needed to be out by a certain time. And one of the reasons why we came here is so that we wouldn't be saying, oh, well, we got to get out of here. And that if we needed to do something, we were right here. If we asked a question that was a gotcha question, that they could go right to the office and find, So that's why I'm saying we might need to talk about this again.
And you are correct, as in the board member that brought that up, or former board member, was the board member or former board member that wanted our meetings to be at City Hall. So I think there was some combination of that. And so there's a couple of things. I'm not I was noticing in Trustee Sujisaka, from a policy standpoint, we do a timer for public comment, what we say and it's different. And so there's a lot of things that we do need to review. Obviously, it's going to take time. But I do agree with you, Trustee Ali, the goal of these meetings are for us to be effective and hopefully putting our focus on our students, which brings me to what I was going to say, which is, so at the Masters in Governance training I had today, they gave statistics on high-performing governance teams. And apparently 60% of the high-performing governance teams 60% of the time is focused on student information. So presentations about students, presentations about after school programs, right? They don't spend a lot of time on, well, they spend, I think it was 15% is on finances and budget, and then another 5% on like facilities and things like that. So when we look at our agenda, how much of our agenda is focused on student achievement and student outcomes, and how much of it is truly focused on basically, and I'm not, this might come off wrong, business, things that maybe the public is like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but we just spent 50%, 60%, 70% of our time talking about numbers and facilities. And so then that seems like we need to maybe take a step back and rethink what is on the agenda, which brings me to the calendar. Because I know in the past, I've been on the board 3 years. It's my first year as a president. I never had access to a calendar before being a president. And I know some people may feel like, oh, well, no, it's just between the superintendent and the board president. And as much as I agree from an agenda planning standpoint that it's probably messy to have too many people involved, but I do think that having a calendar that showcases what we're going to be talking about, and essentially it's more of a forecast of what you may be getting presented to, and maybe you even preparing yourself in advance for those meetings. I think it's very important that the entire board, maybe we can change it after I'm president, but as of now, the entire board should have access to that. I just think it makes sense.
Sorry, can I respond to that? I just want to recall that it's important to work out the schedule for the agenda planning meeting between the president and the superintendent. However, there have been times where the vice president was invited to those, and I have not been invited. So I think that was part of the issue for me too, is what you're saying. I felt, I was surprised by that long consent agenda. And if I had been part of that meeting, maybe I would have spoke up at that time. So I know it's not a requirement, but I know that it has been extended also to the vice president if they're available to make it to that agenda planning meeting.
Yeah.
Comment. This is not a new request. I will say, with all due respect to our former superintendent, a request was made to share the calendar so that we're not having requests after the agenda has been posted, because what it has allowed is that sometimes when we're asking for something to be on a future agenda, the agenda would come up and that future request wasn't seen at least down the road for some time, and it becomes an afterthought. So there was a request of the superintendent to open that to the board so that we could make sure that, hey, remember, do you recall I made the request for this agenda item? Could it be considered for this agenda? I appreciate seeing this finalized draft. Could I make this recommendation, or could this come off before it goes public? So I know that this is what was recommended before, but I know that it took a little extra work. But I share that to say that I also think that the more we do on the back end will help us to be, again, more efficient when we produce the final draft of the agenda for the public. So I would like to say that I'm in agreement of that, because I am someone who has asked for that when I was the vice president, and I assumed I was supposed to be at those agenda meetings. One, because I wanted to learn, and I was vice president twice. And then when I became president, I also wanted to make sure that it was a two-party system, because we would support each other, and we would be in sync if the other were not present. And I just think it just makes better dialogue for us to produce a final product.
So there's two things I'm hearing, so I was vice president before I became president, and I was also never invited. So I didn't even know that was an option, being also that again, year 3 in this role. So I'm still learning, and I'm probably going to continue to learn as I'm on the board, and I'm grateful for that. So I'm glad to hear that was even something that was allowed, because this is the first time I'm hearing of it. Second part of that is, I think there's two things then. I'm happy with the whole notion of bringing in the vice president to help with the agenda planning, but board calendar, completely different. I feel like that is more so like, okay, in January, in February, in March, these are the items that are going to be on the agenda. We're going to have presentations from TRP. We're going to have, like, for example, I know we had our meeting at TRP. We're planning to have an on-site school meeting. So that way we are prepared months in advance. So I think that's more so what I was thinking. But I think in addition to that, I do like the idea of having, depending on the meeting or the agenda planning, having the vice president come on board. And I think also for our new trustees, when having the vice president understand the process of becoming president will help them when they take on that role, which again, I didn't know any of that until today. So thank you.
Well, what I was also going to say was in that. So you were saying that there are too many people on the calendar. You can just make it that if it's a Google Calendar, you can actually just make it so that everyone else is view only, and so that only you and the superintendent would have editing access. So we could only see it. We couldn't touch it. Actually, that's I think what I'd highly recommend, so that it's just the president and the superintendent that can affect it, and then we just view it.
I have it ready for next school year. So in the information bulletin this week, I will share it with you all, but I'll make it view only. And then also we will invite, if it's okay with you, the Vice President Ali to our next planning session, which would be at the end of July.
And I just wanted to add one more thing, just for clarity. I think I love the view part, because I think what I'm trying to say is not to have it be a broad conversation for the agenda planning, but knowing the date will allow us to say, hey, by the way, can I add this to your discussion if possible, instead of it's like, oh, I want to be a part of that. I don't envision the process being that way.
Noted. And agree. And this has been a great discussion when we're trying to make board comments. Totally fine, though. And I think I just also want to say thank you, Ms. McCulloch, for bearing with us. I know that, you're new to your role, and we have there's just a lot of things going on. But I will say that, year 3 for me, the discussions that we've had, at least this year, have been so much more robust. And I'm not going to say it's because of me. I'm going to say it's because of the board that we have sitting currently has allowed for us to have these kind of discussions. And I am very grateful and appreciative for it. I think I've said in very many meetings that we don't all have to agree, but I think it's important that we all get our voices heard because we all are here for the same reason. And it is because we are hoping to focus our best interests on our students and hopefully get them to achieve and move on to the next level of their lives, with the foundation being the Jefferson Elementary School District. So with that, I would like to adjourn our meeting at 7. Now I don't know the time. Sorry, 8:17.